Hi everyone, my name is James Ivanatakis and I'm the Executive Director of the Australian American Fulbright Commission. Welcome to In Conversations. So today we're joined by 2011 Fulbright Scholar, Professor Clare Sullivan from Georgetown University, who actually researches digital identity. She's a cyber lawyer, long before cyber lawyers were a thing. So welcome, Clare. So let's begin by talking about your original 2011 Fulbright Scholarship.
Okay, so my award, I was awarded the South Australian Fulbright Scholarship in 2011, and I'm a cyber lawyer. So my research was on digital identity, which, believe it or not, in 2011, I mean, everybody knows what digital identity is now, but nobody knew about it then. And I would go to parties and say, you know, my PhD thesis is on digital identity, and people would go, there'd be blank looks, and they go, nice weather we're having today, because it just wasn't on the radar at all. But that was my work, and I started that off. I wrote the first book on digital identity as an emergent legal concept. And after I wrote that, I applied for the Fulbright, and I got that. So I went to Washington, DC for my Fulbright.
Fantastic. And tell us a little bit, potted journey since 2011, 2012. You come back and how did you end up in Georgetown?
Okay, well, it's quite a saga on both a professional and a personal level. So I won the Fulbright. I made a lot of contacts in Washington, DC. I made a point of going to everything I possibly could. And Washington, DC, the two main universities are George Washington University and Georgetown. So I built a lot of contacts at both universities and came back to Australia after that. And then I was awarded an Endeavour Scholarship. So I went back, and this time I was at George Washington for my Fulbright. I went back to Georgetown for my Endeavour Award. And using all the contacts that I'd had from the Fulbright. And in the last week, I had been to a seminar for the US Department of Defense. They were awarding Minerva scholarships for national security issues. And I got an idea for a project virtually in my last week. It was incubating in my mind. And on my last day, I went rushing into Georgetown and I said, is there anybody who could collaborate with me on this? Nobody knew anything about the area that I was talking about. It was on Estonian e-residency, which just was a new thing. They introduced me to a computer scientist at Georgetown. So I was at the law school, at the law centre. So I went back to Australia, and he and I worked that summer on doing a proposal, and we got the award. So we got the scholarship, and I was heading back to Washington to do that. That's one side on the professional side. On the personal side, in the last week of my Fulbright, I met an American man who I subsequently married. And it was amazing. It all just coalesced. Georgetown offered me a job as a result of this grant that we got, and I was getting engaged and getting married. So we decided that we would make our lives in Washington, DC as a result of that.
Well, that's a fantastic. I mean, both of those are fantastic stories, because you reached out to us following one of our newsletters, and you said that Fulbright changed your life, but it literally changed your life.
It literally changed my life. Yes, yeah. So for all those people out there looking for love, the Fulbright works.
So let's jump forward. So at Georgetown in 2019, you set up the Cyber Smart Centre. Can you tell us a little bit about why you decided to do this and what the centre is about?
Okay, well, when I went back to Georgetown to work on the Minerva project, basically I was working with people that were in another centre, another research centre called the Software and Security Engineering Centre. So I was the only lawyer working with a team of computer scientists. And basically, when my award finished for the Minerva, they integrated me into that centre, and I continued on doing research for industry in the mostly US companies on cyber work. And it just really became very apparent very quickly to me how important it was to have the cross-discipline side there, particularly the law, but also things like behavioural sciences and social science and ethics and all of those things. Because basically all this great scientific work was being pumped out, but when it went out to be deployed, I was the one saying, no, you can't do that. That infringes privacy. No, you can't do it that way. You need to do it this way. Otherwise, you're going to have legal issues. So it was really from that it started. And once it's this kind of idea of cross-discipline work was proposed to industry, they just went crazy for it. So that's really how CyberSmart started. It was driven by an idea, then industry supporting it, and we just put a grant in to get the centre started.
I think it was an interdisciplinarity of the centre that I found fascinating when I was reading about it. And you talk about how industry sort of jumped on it. Was that the important part, that it was so interdisciplinary that industry could sort of see the multiple dimensions of it?
Yeah, it was very important because it meant that we did a soft start. We started it in November 2019. We've only just got the NSF grant. So it really, industry funded us to do that, and we had no other money to do it. They were the driving force. But there's another side to it, and it was exactly the same thing that I experienced with working on digital identity, where it went from being something that was really obscure and nobody understood to being really in the public consciousness. And what had happened between November 2019 and now is the NSF kind of caught up. And, they started to pick up on how important this was too. And I think, again, the timing was just right. We went in with a product that hit a nerve, both with the US government and with industry in the US.
So, I mean, let's jump to contemporary issues then. I mean, all over the news lately has been cyber attacks and, be it the shutdown of major infrastructure, ransomware payments. It's costing millions of dollars, not only in the ransomware, but also the loss of productivity. So a couple of questions around that. I mean, is this something that that the future activities of the CyberSmart Centre will try and respond to, or is that one of the priority areas?
Yeah, it's always been one of our priority areas. I mean, we were working on the exchange of cyber security threat information in the private sector 5 years ago, before it was even on the radar. So that's very much where we are. We're looking ahead. We're not really dealing with the sort of the issues that are hitting the press now. We're several years ahead working on what we need to do to address that. So very much on the agenda in terms of security and all of the factors that go into that. So it's not just the science, it's the law, it's the behaviour, all of those things that we bring together.
I mean, yeah, it is such an, for people like me, for most of us, I think, for the vast majority, it's such an overwhelming area. Like, it's almost like, because we're so reliant on everything from our smartphones to our smart televisions to email. I mean, it seems like a little bit like the Wild West out there. It seems all a little bit crazy. I mean, is that the reality of it? Is it just so out of control and governments are trying to catch up, or is there more happening than what we realize? I suppose is my question.
There's a lot more happening than you realize. I mean, there's people at every level working on these things. So there's, there are entrepreneurs, there are people that are very wealthy, that have made inventions and can have a lot of free time that are working on it. Governments are working on it. The private sector are all working on it. I mean, I understand the concept that it's the Wild West, and in a sense that it is, because it's new issues that we're having to address. We've never had to deal with any of this stuff. But I'm absolutely confident that there are technological solutions to all of these issues. We just need to work to find them and make them deployable. That's the other thing. There's a lot of good science, but it needs to comply with the laws and be workable and all of those kind of things.
And is this area, I mean, people talk about it as being part of the sort of the new conflict space. Like, is cyber war, is that going to continue to play out, or are we going to end up with something like almost like a rules-based system where countries possibly can guarantee, say, okay, that's that part of the cyber world we're not going to touch because it's too important to nations, and things like weapon systems or health systems. Like, is there a way that is there in the sort of the global geopolitics, are countries negotiating on that level about what's in and what's out in their sort of cyber war, I suppose?
Yes, and there's a lot of capability, particularly at the military level, to deal with these things. So there's a lot of intelligence about what's going on and what's not going on, and addressing those issues. I mean, not just in the cyber world, but also in terms of politics and trade and tariffs and all of those kind of things. So it's the whole political spectrum that's brought to bear on these things to bring countries into line. We know which countries they are usually. There's a sort of set group of them. I mean, in terms of whether there's going to be rules, for years there's been a lot of talk about treaties and agreements. And there's been some success on that and some standards and things like that. But I think it's mostly going to be diplomacy in the foreseeable future that addresses most of the issues there.
Yeah, and just a couple more questions. But one is, like, when we hear on the news that there has been a cyber attack, and it says it's been tracked down to, to some sort of, to one country or another country, or criminals within another country, and so on. I mean, how accurate is that tracing system? Like, is it a guess? I mean, again, it's for people on the outside looking in. Like, how accurate is that tracking down?
I can assure you it's not a guess. I mean, the capabilities of the military in this, it's extraordinary. I mean, there's a lot more capabilities than any of us really know. I hear a little bit about it, but and I would say the US and Australia are leaders in that. I mean, the Five Eyes group really on their game with this. So it's, yes, if there's a statement released about a certain country doing something, it's pretty accurate.
Okay, and so one last question, I suppose. What do you think are the sort of for cyber smarts, but what are the top 3 priorities going forward? You sort of mentioned that it's not just about what's happening today, but it's always looking ahead, and you've obviously managed to do that quite well, going back to 2011 with talking about cybersecurity before it was a thing. So what are your top, say, 3 priorities at the moment?
Okay, the absolute top priority is the emergence of digital identity, and that's front and center in what we do, and it's going to be enormous. COVID is driving that to a large extent. So you would have heard in the press, there's a lot of talk about COVID passports and so forth. So really, it's that sort of global digital identity, as well as the national one, is a big growth area that we're seeing, and all that goes with it. So all the attached issues, data protection, privacy, transfer of personal data, the protection of health data. Behind digital identity is a huge bank of issues, and the security of it also. So that's number 1. Number 2, I think continually the hacking and the security of our systems, which, as you've mentioned, is going to get even more worrisome, and I guess a focus for us as the Internet of Things really swings into operation. It's already underway, but virtually everything is going to be connected, and you see what happens if there's problems with the power grid and all of those kind of things. So that kind of protection. And I would say the third one is kind of, it's not really focused on any particular area. I would say it's more of a methodology, that we see a coalescence of law and ethics, and kind of an ethical, legal development of technology. So that technology is really not just designed from a scientific point of view, but designed to be ethically deployed and user-friendly, privacy, built-in privacy protection, all of that kind of thing. And one of the things that we're looking at is almost a rating system. So, when you buy an appliance, you go in for an energy rating, where you can rate a piece of software as to whether it's privacy protective or, whether it's user-friendly, that kind of thing. That's one of the areas that we're thinking about.
Fantastic. Claire, thank you so much for your time. It's really, really great to chat to you and to learn about the Cyber Smart Centre and to hear about your journey. It's amazing. Thank you so much.
Okay, my pleasure. I've enjoyed it immensely. Thank you.
Thank you.